Hi. So I'm going to wait for somebody to ask a question, but I want to talk a little bit about trauma and eating disorders and recovery. So I know that there are some people, therapists, there is an opinion or belief that eating disorders are caused by trauma. And then there's people like me that say parents were pretty much perfect. My upbringing was pretty much perfect. I don't feel that I ever experienced trauma as I would define trauma before my eating disorder started. My eating disorder was fucking traumatic, but I really can't say that I ever felt traumatized before my eating disorder. And then some therapists will say to me, well, life is traumatic. And so just stuff that I wouldn't necessarily define as trauma. Like I define trauma as something awful, like rape or witnessing a murder or a parent dying, or like having that's what I define trauma as. So I'm very aware that my definition of trauma is not the same as other people's definition of trauma. And so for me, with my own definition of trauma, I'm like, I did not experience any trauma. And then some people would say, well, you don't have to define trauma as rape or a close relative dying or something awful happening to you. You can define trauma as lots of smaller things, which I just don't know if I do. So then somebody would say to me, well, you did experience trauma because you got into an argument with your parents every now and then and stuff like that. And I'd be like, about that, I know that's some people's opinion and belief, so they're welcome to that. But for me personally, I'm just kind of like, yeah, I don't really actually define that as trauma. And so I still sort of stick by the view that I did not experience trauma before I developed my eating disorder. And from my point of view, that all works because I do think eating disorders are largely genetic. It's the genetics plus prolonged energy deficit, boom, that's what happens. Now, where it gets tricky is that if somebody does experience trauma, then experiencing trauma can lead them to not want to eat as much food. That can be one of the responses that a person has to trauma. And that can lead to energy deficit. And then if that person has the genetic predisposition for an eating disorder, boom, eating disorder sparks. So then you could say, well, the trauma contributed to that person's development of an eating disorder, in which I would say, yes, the trauma contributed to energy deficit. And in somebody else that didn't have the genetic predisposition for an eating disorder, they could have had trauma, they could have gone into energy deficit, and they could not have developed an eating disorder because they didn't have the genetic part. And so I would then say the trauma contribute to energy deficit, and therefore it's a contributing factor to your eating disorder. It's definitely not the cause. And that's where sort of I disagree with a lot of therapists who are like, well, in order for you to therefore recover from your eating disorder, we have to treat the trauma. Whereas I'd say, well, actually, in order for a person to recover from an eating disorder, we have to treat the energy deficit, because it's always energy deficit that is actually the cause of an eating disorder. Something else could have caused the energy deficit, but that is the energy deficit that caused the eating disorder. So while we may want to work on a contributing factor, I'm not saying do not go to a therapist to work out your trauma. I'm absolutely not saying that. I'm saying that they're two separate things, and you absolutely have to work on the energy deficit, because you could go to all the therapy in the world and talk about the trauma, and you could work through the trauma, and you could have the trauma just de-traumatized, if that's a thing. But if you're still in energy deficit, you're still going to have an eating disorder. So that's kind of my stance on eating disorders and trauma. And that's my opinion. And I'm not even a fucking therapist. So this is the thing with the eating disorder fields. Different professionals have different opinions. That just happens to be mine. All right. Okay. We got some questions. Good grief. Jada says, I think I'm relapsing. Do you have any suggestions to get back on the path of recovery? Yes, eat. I know it sounds ridiculously simple, but that's the only thing that's actually going to get you recovered. Hello, Tabs. This is Rachel. I was just wondering about something. Is it normal for me not to want to be an intuitive eater? I want to eat all day forever non-stop without caring about hunger and fullness. Is that eating disorder too? No, that's actually when we're in energy deficit, one part of the brain is like, human, you're in energy deficit. You need to eat all the food all the time. That's the part of the brain that we need to listen to. Your brain's doing that because your brain, knowing your body, knows that you do not have enough energy. And so therefore, your brain is trying to amend that. Your brain is trying to fix it. That's why we binge. The binge is not a disorder. The binge is not a problem. The binge is the body and the brain trying to fix the problem, fix the whole of energy deficit. And it feels out of control, and your eating disorder hates it, but that still doesn't make it not okay. Binging is okay. Eating the whole time or desiring to eat the whole time is actually your body being brilliant and trying to fix the problem of you being in energy deficit. And the wonderful thing is that when you are no longer in energy deficit, your body won't try and make you eat the whole time because it's really super fucking smart. It knows whether it's in energy deficit or not, and it knows whether you're restricting or not. And if you're restricting, and your body will go, well, I don't know when I can next get food, so I'm going to make my human eat the whole time. So actually you need to do two things to make extreme mental hunger go away. One, you have to get out of energy deficit, and two, you have to not restrict so that your body actually trusts that food is going to come frequently. And basically, actually what your body is trusting if you don't restrict is that you are no longer in a famine. And so therefore it no longer has to tell you to eat the whole time. And then you no longer want or need to eat the whole time. It really all comes circling straight back to trust your body. It knows what the fuck it's doing. Okay? All right. Fox says, I'm overweight and I still have extreme hunger, and I'm worried that if I eat as much as I want, then I'll only gain more weight and it'll never go back down and normalize. What should I do? You can't restrict. You're not in recovery if you restrict. And the other thing I say was overweight according to whom? According to a BMI chart? How do you know you're overweight? What if your body doesn't think you're overweight? What if your body thinks that you're actually at the perfect weight? Or what if your body actually thinks that you are under the weight that it should be? So overweight, that term is a judgment. And that, I'm not trying to be harsh on you. That could be a judgment that somebody else inflicted on you. It could be a judgment that a textbook inflicted on you. But I do want you to think about that. What makes you think you're overweight? What if your body's like, this is the way I need to be at, human? So here, look, there's either restriction or there's not restriction. Unrestricted eating is unconditional. Unrestricted eating doesn't stop when you get to a certain weight and then you start restricting, because that's still restricting. And so if you want to recover from your restrictive eating disorder, you can't restrict food. It doesn't matter what your weight is. As soon as you restrict food, you just wage war on your body, and your body will retaliate by lowering metabolism and making you really fucking hungry. So what you need to do, Fox, is you need to work out, where am I still restricting? Because if I am still eternally hungry right now, then that is a sign that my body does not trust that there's ample food in the environment. And the reason probably that your body doesn't trust that there's ample food in the environment is because it's not getting all that it needs, because you're still restricting. And that is true whatever weight you are. If you're restricting, you just told your body there's not ample food, you can't have what you want. And then the body's going to go, well, fuck, I should eat even more then. So that's the cycle that you're probably going to find that you might have got yourself into. And the only way to get yourself out of that cycle, I'm afraid, is to not restrict. And yes, that might mean that you gain more weight. And if you do, that's absolutely what you needed to do. I hope that helps. Shit, I've got to go. All right. Sorry. Bye.